She doesn't know the answer yet. But they will tear it from her mouth. Don't make a sound.
I can feel them.
Getting some Descent vibes here. Ugh. Hello, everybody. Ketchi1383 with Ketchi Gaming and Senua's Saga Hellblade 2. Or is it Hellblade 2 Senua's Saga? Either way, it came out. And I want to say it was an anticipated release, and I guess to some degree, yes. I mean, I played the first one, and when I played that, I won't say I was in a dark place. It wasn't in a good place. I was working for a company that was supposed to be rapidly expanding, and it turns out they expanded too much too fast. So they ended up having to contract instead. But the one thing they did do is build us a whole new building, and unfortunately with that came a change in shift, which had me working overnights, and as a result, I developed a form of psychosis from sleep deprivation. And then I played this game, so I have a bit of an idea what it's like to deal with a little bit of mental illness, the voices in your head, which seems to be the main selling point for this game. Or I should say the main selling point for the previous Hellblade. And they're just hoping the reputation of the first one would carry this. So, I'm not gonna lie to you, it's not very great, at least in my opinion. It's actually really, really boring. It's barely a walking simulator, or let me rephrase that, it's barely something beyond a walking simulator. It's like a glorified walking simulator, is the nicest way I could put it. There are other characters this time around, some dialogue exchange and stuff like that, and you have the voices in Senua's mind, which they went from being ambiguous about it, trying to get you to decide whether or not they're actually real, to linking it with her ability to see things or perceive things that other people can't. And some of these other characters that you interact with actually can see some of the things that you would not associate with reality. Like the giants, they can see them. So not everything that she's experienced is from a form of psychosis. Kind of taken away from the mystery of, is she actually insane and seeing some of these things basically in her mind? And kind of removing a bit of the mystery when it comes to the game. So I don't want to do a full-on review, mainly because I didn't enjoy this game. It was extremely short. It was another extremely short game. The last one I did was an indie game. This was developed by a AAA studio with a backing of Microsoft. And with me sitting idle for a little bit of that, maybe capturing some footage again, we're sitting around 10 to 11 hours. Full completion of the game, including all the achievements. And regardless of the whispers in Senua's head that you get to hear, it's not really all that intriguing. A lot of the time you just sort of push the analog stick in one direction and just go with it. There are portions of combat, but the combat in this game is just poorly thought out, and it's actually kind of terrible. But it's an extremely linear game, and the way they handle this whole entire thing, it's like they're going for a cinematic sort of experience versus a gameplay experience. It felt like they were trying to make a movie than a game, and it made for a very boring experience. Like I said, most of this is just you pushing in various directions to guide Senua, and that's all you do. And if I were to be generous, and this would be extremely generous, there are some light puzzle elements with some, I guess, perception puzzles trying to get you to line up the runes again, but it's pretty light in terms of puzzle solving abilities. They pretty much hold your hand for that, so it was zero challenge whatsoever. Again, kind of detracting from the previous one. It feels like a big, huge step down from the previous Hellblade. Now, the one thing I'll give it, or let me say more than one, let's just go with a couple of things. It's a gorgeous looking game. I'll give it that. A lot of detail, a lot of sound going on. I mean, the voices, it's kind of a hit or miss thing. And they're mainly used as a tool, not so much as a form of presentation or anything like that to help guide you when you play, pretty much telling you what you should do. Even when it's obvious, the voices will be like, yes, you need to light that particular torch on that brazier or brazier, whatever it is. You need to put out that fire. It literally just does that. I died very little in this game. The only time I really had any particular issue with not being able to make it through a segment was when I was fighting, I shouldn't say fighting, going through the segment of the game where you are killing the first giant. And the only reason why I died there was my cat bumped my hand while trying to get me to pet it while I was playing the game, and instead of being where I should have been, I got burnt. And then another time, I actually had to let the game kill me in combat just so I could talk about it to see what would happen. And it takes a lot for the game to kill you in combat. It's just another game in a long list of games that have just become so overly simplistic to try and reach as wide of an audience as possible that they detract from the game altogether. How enjoyable it is, how likely I am to play it again. I mean, they added a whole bunch of things to the end of the game if you beat it, and then you find all their little bits of mythology and lore around the whole entire sort of various maps, which you can add a narrator, but that really doesn't change the fact that the game is extremely boring to play. I mean, I was 2/3, maybe 3/5 of the way through the game, and I was done. I was like, when is this going to end? I was just bored out of my mind. And the worst part is they want $50 for this. I'm like, this is not a $50 game. Especially at only 11 hours. I know there's one YouTuber out there that says, well, if you really enjoyed the game, it was worth that amount. No. There is a certain dollar amount to the game that I would consider way too much. This was a one and done. And to be honest, if I was on a time limit, I would have tried to get my money back or something like that of how bored I was with this game. So, unfortunately, the only little bit of combat that I did record was in a cave where you fought the things that reminded me of The Descent. So, it might be a little hard to see depending on your brightness settings. Typically, it's actually really easy to see in the cave section, but this one they made it a little bit darker, but it wasn't really an issue. So, the combat is annoyingly basic. You have your quick attack and then you have your heavy attack. So if they block, you use a heavy attack, you go through the block and you land your consecutive quick attacks. So the thing that drives me nuts is there's no flinch mechanics for them. There's flinch mechanics for you. So you can get hit several times and you can't do anything about it. And there's no blocking, there's no parrying, it's just pure dodging. And there's no real indication of which way you should dodge. And I've had mixed results in the game with certain enemies on where I should dodge and if I'm successful or not. And Senua's swings are so basic that if an enemy is down on the ground, she can't hit them. Like, they'll be over animated, they'll be rolling on the ground, reeling from being hit, but they're not dead. But you try and swing to take advantage of that, and your swings will just go over them. It's designed to do that so that you can't hit them while they're down. But their attacks, if you do dodge them, this is part of one of my issues is I know I've had dodges from attacks clearly miss me, like a clear good 6 inches from me, but it still counts as a hit. And that's just like a pet peeve, a game design sin, to have such a huge hitbox for the character and a tiny little one for the NPCs that you're fighting. But the other thing you can do is you can build up focus, and you can use it, which just basically gives you the equivalent of bullet time. It slows things down, allowing Senua to go in and attack without any sort of fear or repercussion of being hit. Now, the other thing that drives me nuts is that, again, I said is over animated, and it's not just the attacks, it's when you finish them, it does the whole entire animation, but it's like way too dragged out. And then at certain points, they have battles that just take way too long as well, with a few battles there are. And you kill something, and something just happens to grab onto you. And that's how they introduce the next fight, or they'll just turn the camera to the next enemy that's approaching. There's no multiple creature fights. It's always one-on-one. I think there might have been one exception to that. The combat in this game is just so unintriguing, I just don't remember all that well. Now, I did mention a thing or two that I said was nice. And I already mentioned that, yes, it's a pretty looking game. The other thing is a lack of an interface, which is neat. You're not constantly watching the interface. You're paying attention to what's on the screen. And like I said, they felt like they wanted to make a cinematic experience more than they wanted to make a game. I mean, they even have the 2 black bars on the top and bottom of it. But there's no health meter or anything like that. Everything that you need to know is right there on the screen. The focus is located on the mirror, or they say it's a mirror. It looks like a gold disc on her right hip there. Hits, if you take too many, are indicated by your screen turning red. And to be honest, that really is it. There's no indications that you need to light something by hitting the action button or anything like that. Pretty straightforward, which kind of lends itself to the bland boringness of the game, because I feel like in order to get away with that, they had to simplify the controls. So overall, I would just call it an over-glorified walking simulator. Yes, there's a lot of cinematic moments here and there, more so than probably any other game that I've played that are similar, where you just push the analog stick in one direction. I mean, yes, there's combat, but it's just so bland, boring, and poorly designed that it's not fun in any shape or form. And like I previously stated, it felt like they were riding on the reputation of the previous Hellblade to make this game more than what it actually is. A short, overpriced experience of a walking simulator. But if you have Game Pass, I would play it that way. That's how I played it, and I'm glad I did it via Game Pass, because this was not worth $50. I mean, you can try it yourself. I would encourage you to, but it's this weird trend that I've seen where games are just dumbed down to the point where they're just not fun at all, and I just want them to be over, or I just don't bother playing them anymore. It felt like they focused way too much on eye candy and were relying on the whole entire voices in your head and presentation of the eye candy to sell the game, and focused primarily on that instead of the actual gameplay. Anyways, if you made it this far, thanks for watching. Have a good one.